Now I'm being joined as we begin this very important conversation by Undiga Emuekpere, a dual qualified solicitor in Nigeria and England, Wales, specializing in telecommunications, data protection, e-commerce, international trade, and most of all, fertility law. She is the CEO of Readmore House and the Learned Company, promoting literacy and professional development. It's my pleasure to welcome you in the house today, Undiga. So let's start at the very beginning. For many families, the big question is when should they tell the child, or if they should tell the child that they are adopted. So when is the right time to tell a child that they are adopted? And is there even a law that guides this? And if not, should there be?
Well, I think there have been a lot of studies that say the earlier the better. The earlier the better. Children, we don't give children as much credit as they deserve. If a child learns from very early on that this is their birth story, they learn to live with it as normally as I have a big nose or my ears are bigger than every other person's ears. So it becomes part of their birth story, and then it gives the parents and the child the opportunity to walk through that process, because it's a process. It's not just something that happens once. The child will hear about it and will ruminate on it in accordance with their emotional and psychological development, and they will come back and ask questions. Oh, mommy, did you say I had another mommy? What does that mean? And both of you are on a journey, while the child makes their peace with that as they develop in themselves and they grow. They also develop with that truth with them. And I believe that when a child has a longer period to deal with it, it becomes natural. So somebody says, I heard that you're adopted. Yes, I have two mommies. I have two daddies, or I have two sets of grandparents. I have two families. It becomes a natural thing, because for me, and this is not speaking like a lawyer, I'm speaking as a parent. Yes. I think it is very important that parents give their children the emotional tools to deal with whatever reality that they need to deal with. And that is part of their story. You don't want them to go to school or somewhere else and it is maliciously disclosed because somebody is trying to make them feel less than. So I think even though, legally speaking, we don't have a law about it, what happens... But
should there be, though? Should there be something that makes it imperative that parents tell their children the truth of their origin?
I think so. I think the law kind of reflects us and our secrecy and our stigmas and our hang-ups about adoption. Because the law doesn't say anything about disclosure of information. The only thing the law does is that adoption proceedings are held in private. They're not held in open court. Adoption records are sealed. And when an adopted child turns 18, then they can apply to the court for those records to be unsealed and for them to get information about their biological parents. But that's when they turn 18. But I think that it leaves it to the parents to decide if and when. Some children actually find out they're adopted after their parents have passed. Your parents have passed.
That must be quite traumatic.
Yes, your parents have passed, or the people you think are your parents have passed, and then you're going through paperwork, and then you come across this adoption certificate with you as a subject matter of the adoption. And then the person who should walk you through that journey is no longer there. Yeah. And then the child is hit with a double whammy. The parents you thought were your parents are not your parents. The parental protection that you thought you had is no longer there, and you're facing the reality of something that affects your fundamental sense of identity. And the person who is best equipped to help you walk that journey is gone.
That's it. Okay, you've spoken about timing, but some parents freeze, when at the thought of it, because they just have no clue how to go about it. So do you think there should be some form of counseling for the parents, and before they actually take on this journey of disclosure? I
think it should be mandatory. I think adoptive parents should be counseled even before the adoption is completed, even before the court order is done. I think it should be made a requirement that they should go for mandatory counsel. Maybe it's the Ministry of Social Welfare or something, or get a professional counselor to walk them through it. It's a lot to take on, because most of the time when somebody is adopting, they've gone through a grieving period of, I can't have a child by myself. And then will I be able to? And then they finally arrive at the stage where they say, I'm going to do it. And then they do it. And there's still a lot of unpacking to be done, and the child is already in their lives.
Okay, but there's also the cultural expectations that shape adoption practices. What needs to change in law or practice?
Well, I think...
for this to be more embraced, better embraced?
I think culturally, we still have a lot of stigmatization about assisted parenthood, including adoption. And it is in a bid to protect themselves and their children that you have all this secrecy. That's why we're having this discussion about disclosure. Because I don't want people to know that this child is adopted. I don't want them to treat the child differently. I don't want the child to feel that they are not loved, and so on and so forth. So it is the response to that sensitivity. It comes from a good place. The person is trying to bring the child close. I don't want anything to harm you, but you have to be realistic about how you protect your child.
Yeah, especially in cases where you hear that, most times you hear that it's in school that these children tend to now find out their true origins.
I agree.
And that also now comes with its own...
I mean, it's a traumatic way to find out that you're adopted. So my view is, let's deal with it from day one.
But what if they don't? And because there are also complicated cases where sometimes the child, the name on the birth certificate is given to the person that adopts the child. So do you advise that if any woman wants to pursue this...
Or man.
Yes. But can men adopt?
Yes, they can. In some states.
Oh, really?
In some states.
Without the wife in the picture?
In some states. In some states. It depends on the circumstances. There's some men who, for instance, are widowed or they never married and they have a good supportive family system around them. They have sisters, they have mother, and the child, it is clear that the child is being brought into a loving environment where the child is wanted. In some such situations, they are unusual. You have a lot of things to prove and tell. And some judges will throw it out altogether because they're like, no, especially if the child is young. So what they do in some states is that if you is a single parent, you're not allowed to do cross-gender adoption. So if you're a single mom, you must adopt a girl. If you're a single man, you must adopt a boy for obvious reasons because of, sexual attraction and things like that. But the world has evolved because people now get attracted to people of the same sex. So
exactly. I was just going to say that.
We have to rethink some of these things,
I was just going to say that. But what about in situations where, like I was saying now, for instance, that in all this bid to hide secrecy or no secrecy, they now decide that, they want the child, but they put the child's name in the birth, they put their own names in the birth certificate. How can this backfire on the long term? Well,
in the first place, a birth certificate is supposed to carry the name of the woman who gave birth to the child and the name of the person who acknowledges paternity of the child. So if the child is born and then you get a birth certificate with your name, that means that birth certificate is a falsification. What you should do is, after the child, you've made arrangements to adopt the child, is to approach a family court and get an adoption order. And after that adoption order, you now have the right to get a birth certificate issued in the name that you want for the child. That's what the national...
So it's imperative that that name, birth certificate, should have the original parents'
Otherwise,
name. Okay, what about children that are dumped in dustbins?
You'll be accused of trafficking.
Okay, what about children that are dumped in dustbins? You can't tell the trace of the parents.
If a child is... There's a procedure. So a child that is found in a dumpster or in a dustbin is what we call in law a foundling. A child that is a foundling.
Okay, foundling, okay.
So in that case, of course, there's no evidence of who the biological parents are. There's a procedure for it. The child is taken to a police station, taken to an orphanage, booked in as being a foundling, and then there's a procedure for it, for foundlings to be adopted.
Okay. Another question I want to ask is, what about single mothers? We just mentioned single fathers.
Yes.
How do you now explain to the child the absence of a father? Does it make the explaining more difficult? Does it make it more difficult for a single mother to adjust with her adopted child than for a married woman?
No, I don't think so. People, things, life happens. Somebody can be married and then loses her spouse, and she has to raise the children by herself. And the children will grow up knowing that there's no dad in the picture for one reason or the other. And we have to face the truth. A lot of women are raising children by themselves, and the child will grow up knowing that this is mommy and this is all I have, and she loves me. But what is more important for a child's development is a stable, loving environment. Yes. And I'd rather have a child grow up with a single mom who loves them and is willing to give them a place where they can thrive, than for that child to grow up in an orphanage.
Okay. Now, there's also the issue of the DNA kits everywhere. Do you understand? Free access and what have you. Now, you told this child that you love them. You've told them, you've disclosed to them that they're not your biological child, but God gave them to you, the whole 9 years and what have you.
Yes.
What now happens if this child now develops a curiosity and wants to do research on their best parents? How do you manage that?
It is one of the risks of adoption. We have that innate desire to know, right? So if you have bonded with that child, the child is secure in the knowledge of your love, and they have a sense of belonging. Even if they do have that curiosity to find out about their genetic origins, they'll be like, okay, right, I found out that this woman gave birth to me, that man is my father, but this is the family where I grew up. So I always tell my children that love is the only thing that multiplies when it's shared. Every other thing depletes. You share it with two people, each person ends up getting less. But love is one thing that the more it shares, it just keeps on multiplying. So if you are secure in the fact that your child knows that you love them and this is where I grew up, them having another family to love shouldn't be a threat to you. That's my view.
Okay, but what if the child is just curious, not necessarily because they love you less?
That is exactly.
Would you encourage them to?
I would encourage the child.
The parent encourage them
I
to
think the
go
parent
ahead.
should. I think the parent should encourage the child, because you know what, the children we have these days, even if you don't give them your blessing, they'll do it behind you.
Okay, what now happens? I'm a house of horrors. A best parent now reappears or resurfaces, because you hear of instances where some people make arrangements or meet people, maybe underprivileged people who are pregnant and don't want the child, and they persuade the person to have the child and give the child to them. And I've heard of instances where the birth mothers don't even see the child because they don't want to get any maternal connection or what have you. What if down the line, this same woman that willingly gave you this child to move on with your life, and you and your child have moved on with your lives, and the child knows that he or she is adopted, you've started a new life, new beginning, new whatever. What now happens if she just suddenly shows up and decides that she wants to play a role in the child's life?
Well, that is where the process of adoption comes into play, and this is why you need to do it properly, because social welfare, a really good social welfare department, and I can speak specifically about the welfare department in the FCT, there's mandatory counseling for every biological parent who wants to give up their children. They don't just say, oh, you want to give up your children, fine, sign here, and we're off to court tomorrow. You go through counseling. This, why do you want to give up this child? And you really clarify your intentions.
Oh, the mother of the child goes through counseling? Okay.
The mother of the child goes through counseling, and it is well documented by a very experienced social worker. And that evidence of the counseling is presented before the court and say, this is a biological parent who wants to give up their child. And then it is clear that you know that if you give this child up and we pass a court order, it means that you can't return to the child's life. And the benefits of the court order is not just that you have a court order that allows you to take the child away and to change the birth certificate and rename the child. It also terminates that person's rights and status as a legal parent. So, and with the court backing, if she tries to re-enter the child's life, she's actually in contempt of court. You know,
everyone keeps talking about adoption, which there's no physical connection, is a child that you have been blessed with.
Yes.
But what about when it's deeper than that? Like the issue of surrogacy and egg donors. Do you understand? Do they need disclosures?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because after all, in the donor egg, the woman literally carries the child physically. And in the surrogacy, the man's sperm carries the child, is the sperm of the child. So they probably feel that they don't need to reveal anything to the child because the child was born, especially in donor eggs, the child was given birth to by the physical mother. Even though the egg doesn't belong to her. So does she really need to reveal that?
You see, all this information are information that are part of that child's birth story. And for me, I'm all in favor of openness rather than secrecy. You see, the thing is this. If you decide to disclose this information to your child, you have a controlled environment where you walk your child through the process of dealing with that information. If you decide to keep it a secret, you actually lose control of how your child finds out.
Let me ask another question, but the truth of the matter is, I was pregnant. Everybody saw that I was pregnant.
Yes.
I carried this child for 9 months.
I
went through birth, labor, for God knows how many hours, and gave birth to this child physically.
But you used a donor egg.
Yeah, but how does a child need to know that?
The child needs to know that because these days, you know, remember...
Why? Sorry, why does the child need to know that?
You see, back in the day, a couple of years ago, I'm in my 50s, I know you're older than me. Remember there was a time that for you to find out if you were pregnant, you needed to go to a lab and submit a urine sample. But now you can walk into Chizob or any pharmacy on Awolowo Road and buy a pregnancy test kit and go into a toilet and find out if you're pregnant. The same thing has happened with DNA testing. Back in the day, very few sophisticated labs could run DNA test arrays to find out whether or not this person was this person person's child or this person was the father or the mother of a child. But now you can go online on Amazon and other places and you can buy a DNA test kit that is really reliable. And you can test yourself. Earlier
What
on,
are the chances of any child finding out that they were donor eggs?
it's easy.
How?
It's very easy.
If there are pictures of when you gave birth, when you were pregnant, and when they...
You see, this is this thing about human curiosity. When is your birthday? I can buy you a DNA test kit just to prove to you how easy it is. I had a case, a real life case, where somebody called me up and said, look, they had a donor conceived child. The woman gave birth to the child, but she used a donor egg because she had the child later in life. The child went on, when children want to go to university, they carry them to expose them to different career options.
Travel abroad sometimes.
Do you understand? They took this child to a number of companies because the child was considering a career in biotech. And then in one of those companies, they give them all these career bags full of souvenirs, notebooks, and things like that. When the child came back from the career trip, the mother was like, let me have a look at the bag you brought. And she opened the bag and found a DNA test kit inside it. And she freaked out because she knew that if that child used that test kit, the child would find out that she was not the biological parent. And then they called me in and asked me for my advice. And I'm like, tell as soon as possible.
Wow.
Because it is better for you to tell the child than for the child to feel that you're keeping secrets. Oh, I was donor conceived. What other secrets have you guys been keeping?
But I don't want to sound like the devil's advocate, but I really don't see many women who physically carry a child, telling the child that the child was donor conceived.
It's in their best interest.
It's probably easier when you don't have any biological link with the child, and then you can tell the child that, yes, I adopted you.
A DNA test kit, a DNA test is the way in which we establish maternity or paternity. So a DNA test kit will always point towards a donor, which will exclude the birth mother. Now remember that it's only you and your family that were in that room the day you gave birth.
Probably you and your husband.
Maybe you and your husband. What if the child begins to question whether that was even the truth? You can't prove it. So the more layers of secrecy you have, the more that the child has to unpack emotionally. And it's not even really a topic that we can really legislate about, because people can ignore a law. We're not talking.
No, but there's no law that says you must.
I agree, but we're not even talking about a law. We're talking about a person, and in every consideration in the law that has to do with children, the overriding consideration is the best interest of the child.
So you think the law should introduce a bill should be passed where such information has to be given to the child, whether the parent likes it or not?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if making it mandatory. I think it's a case where the legislation can recommend. We have soft laws.
Has anybody recommended it? Has it been recommended at all?
It's recommended in many other countries. In the UK, they've actually taken away donor anonymity because they've done a lot of studies and they found that it's in the best interest of the child for the information to be collected and for the information to be given to the child as early as possible in an age-appropriate manner. So they've done away with donor anonymity, which they had for many decades. So it's no longer a feature. So if you are an egg or sperm donor in the UK now, you must submit identifying and non-identifying information.
Does the recipient of the egg, must they also know the history of the donor?
You should ask for some fundamental history, because remember that the donor's medical history is now part of your child's medical history. So if I ask you, do you have glaucoma, high blood pressure in your family? You're thinking about your mother and your father and your grandparents. And that is the kind of information that a parent needs at their fingertips. So if you have an adopted child, for instance, although we don't do that a lot in Nigeria, you should ask for information about the child's
biological information at
the
least.
medical history. Do you have cataracts in your family, high blood pressure, any allergies, to the best of your knowledge? Because that information is information that you need. If the child goes to an emergency, you go to hospital and they say,
even if they are sick in their family.
Do you understand? Does your child do you people have diabetes in your family? If you answer based on the information of your family, that information doesn't guide.
But I want to ask, donor hospitals or people who accept this donor eggs, is that a mandatory thing for them to do now? Do they do that? Do a research on the family of the donors?
In fact, I just came from a conference.
Now, I'm wondering, is it done?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
In a good fertility clinic, they would collect that medical history. I just come from a conference from the AFRH, the Association for Fertility and Reproductive Health of Nigeria, which finished last night. And these are some of the standards we're talking about due diligence, about record keeping. I always advocate that if you're going to have a donor conception, that's what I call a donor information kit should be kept. And I always say, keep it in your phone. Because you never know when you have a medical emergency.
Okay, that's the recipient of the donor.
Yes,
donor
the
egg.
parents who are receiving the donor egg or the donor sperm. That's information you need.
What is your take on social attitudes towards assisted parenting? Society's social attitudes.
Let's even take one step back. Society, social attitudes to infertility and difficulties becoming a parent.
Want to go there.
That's where it all stems from. I will recommend a particular book for you to read. It's mandatory reading if you're interested in this area. It's called The Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives. It's written by a lady called Lola Shonei. And anybody who wants to have a conversation about infertility and assisted parenthood needs to read that book.
What does the book? Just give us a brief summary of the book.
Baba Segi was a very prominent man in society. He had about 3 wives. All his 3 wives had children, and then he now marries a new Iyawo, a young wife who comes in, and she's having difficulties conceiving, and she's tired of being the only woman in the house who doesn't have kids, and so she drags Baba Segi to the hospital, and when they get there, Baba Segi is shooting blanks. Baba Segi has his house full of children, but he's not the father of any of them. And he now found out that Baba Segi is infertile, but all his 3 wives have been organizing their lives quietly, because socially, it is a woman who is barren. A man is never infertile. So you see, infertility is, in our culture, is a woman's cross to bear. So the woman is the one who is going from church A to church B, revival A, revival C, mountain A, mountain B. She's roaming all over the place, but her husband is in the beer parlor drinking beer because he's safe from the pressure. Because the advice is that, Oga, if you can't conceive, if your wife is not giving birth, there's nothing wrong with you. Get a new wife and you start going to church. But sometimes it might be the man.
Thank you so much. So what's your roundup? How do you round this up now? Thank you so much for your detailed analysis. What's your last word on this?
My last word for this is that if you find yourself in a situation where you have to adopt a child, or you have to use a donor egg or donor sperm, get proper documentation, get a court order if you need one, get the evidence, and get your child equipped to deal with that information as early as possible, and you and your child work on that journey.
And you must tell the child.
You must tell that child.
Thank you so much, Undiga, for this. Thank you very much for this deep insight into this very sensitive conversation.